Welcome into Studio A, Maria Trivelpiece, alongside Kyle Youmans for the All-American Edition women's basketball version. We're going to be rotating between the men's and the women's games back-to-back weeks. We did an all-encompassing episode last week. We hope you all tuned into that. This week, we're talking women's hoops, and it's an interesting week in women's hoops.
Oh, it's always going to be an interesting week across the board in the American. Top to bottom, this is a conference that is trying to work their way into a two-bid league. Right now, according to bracketology on ESPN, it is a one-bid team. One-bid league. UTSA would be a 12 seed at the moment. I completely disagree. Could not disagree more. This is a league with two, maybe three teams that are good enough to work their way into that top 50, top 55 of the net rankings. You've got North Texas and South Florida that are right up there in the conversation with UTSA. And so these games are crucial. Going down the stretch and getting closer and closer to March. You got to win the big games, and there are some big games on the horizon. Can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to touch on all of those big games, and you mentioned that we are going to hit the American Athletic Conference from top to bottom. So this is the standings, what they look like right now. Undefeated in conference play is UTSA. They're sitting at the top, and then you have a couple of those teams bunched in the middle. It looks like things will start to separate, right? We'll have the top half of the American and the bottom half. We're not there quite yet. There's a lot of in between right now, but sitting in that upper half, South Florida, Temple, North Texas, UTSA, and we're going to break down all of those teams today.
Yeah, and it's kind of getting to the part of the season where you can kind of break them into tiers. So you can start looking at who are the real contenders to win it all, who are the teams that are going to start finding their way into contention, and who are going to put themselves in the best possible situation going into tournament time. Right now, it's UTSA, North Texas, Temple, South Florida. Those are the ones that I look at as contenders to win the regular season title, to do something special, possibly raise a banner by the time this regular season comes to a close. But don't count out teams like Rice and Tulane and Tulsa and UAB quite yet. Those are the mid-level teams that are trying to fight their way back into the fold. They're going to be good enough to steal some games. You've already seen a couple teams steal games. UAB beat South Florida. We'll talk about that game in a moment. North Texas fell to Tulane. I mean, that Green Wave team has shown some good things under a first-year head coach. So top to bottom, a team or a conference that has the talent to continue to contend, that at some point might end up beating each other, which is going to be a tough thing to maneuver in its own right. But let's start with the only team that has not been beaten quite yet. The UTSA RoadRunners, led by Karen Aston as the head coach and possibly the player of the year in the conference. Jordyn Jenkins has just been unstoppable. 7-0 in conference play. They've been just a go-to team from the beginning, and they're about to get into a really tough stretch, Maria, where we're going to find out what they're made of. But right now, they're made of nothing but gold down in San Antonio.
I love that analogy. But yes, Karen Aston embodying everything that the American really is about. I think we hear Commissioner Tim Pernetti talk about that lunch pail, lunch bucket mentality. And Karen Aston just talks so much about that with her team showing up, playing gritty defense, and growth. I think that's one thing that you'll hear her talk about and her players talk about as well. They're constantly growing as a program, and it looks like they're right about where they want to be at this point in the season. Not only are they undefeated in conference play, they had a fantastic non-conference slate as well. That 9-game win streak is the best since 2008, 2009, and so she just has the RoadRunners in a position that is really good right now.
No, and she's an experienced head coach. She's done a great job everywhere that she's ended up throughout her career. Of course, she coached at Charlotte, she coached at North Texas, she coached at Texas before taking the job at UTSA, and then made the jump from Conference USA into the American. And getting to talk with Karen Aston every year, you've kind of seen that confidence, no matter what the ebb and flow has been from a recruiting standpoint or a personnel standpoint or even the just changing landscape of collegiate athletics. She's been steady all the way through, and UTSA has the team to compete. It's not just Jenkins. They have other players like I'm blanking on the name already right here in front of me.
I got you. Dara Udo.
Yes,
Damar
Udo
Allen,
was the one I was thinking
Nina
of.
De Leon Negron.
Negron was a phenomenal
Asia Proctor.
player. Yes, they're all legitimate talents across the board. They've beaten teams like Wichita State, UAB, Tulsa, Rice, Memphis to start conference play. And they've done it in a balanced scenario. There you go. De Leon Negron is another player that's been great. Udo's been the X factor in the post. She's dynamic as a passer, which I think is great. She was on a top play a couple weeks ago about what she was able to do from a passing standpoint, down in the low block, turning around, hitting De Leon Negron on the perimeter and hitting an open three. But then you just got Jenkins. Jordyn Jenkins is the one that helps this thing out. The reason she's in this position is because of the patience and the commitment from Karen Aston. Aston recruited Jenkins 3 years ago out of USC, where she was the leading scorer for the Trojans. Came with a teammate at the time. They both made that transition to UTSA, and she's been a steady hand ever since. And despite some injury concerns at different points throughout Jenkins' career, Karen Aston remained true. She remained steady along the way with one of her best players, and that patience is now paying off because she's not only healthy, she's not only playing at a high level, she's playing the best basketball of her career. An all-around scorer. She can create, she can serve, she can continue to do everything she can on the offensive side of the ball at a high level. She's going to be the player of the year in the conference.
We're going to clip this at the end of the year, if you're right, because I'm agreeing with you. At this point in time, Jordyn Jenkins is playing like the American Conference Player of the Year.
I'll say right now, it's either going to be her or Tamisha Lanigan. Those are the two.
I like those choices for sure. And
from North Texas, by the way.
The thing with Jenkins for me is you mentioned Karen Aston just like believing in her, bringing her over. I think that patience is a huge factor because as a player, especially when you're dealing with injuries, I don't think people actually realize the difficulty of coming back from an injury, not only physically, but mentally as well, because you're doubting your ability to get back to where you were pre-injury. So you're personally doubting. It doesn't help if you have a coach that's maybe a little wishy-washy on your ability to get back on the court. Aston didn't do that. She believed in Jordyn Jenkins, which allowed Jordyn Jenkins to believe in herself, and now she has been phenomenal. And the thing is everybody knows she's really good, right?
Yeah.
So she's been able to handle the double team. She's been able to handle the pressure. Every single game, she's still stepping up and being successful and contributing to this RoadRunners team. And so I think that says a lot about her as a player and a person because she just has this ability to be good no matter what. They're an undefeated team. She's the best player right now on that undefeated team, and she's just handling that like, well, another day at the office.
No, every team now game plans against Jordyn Jenkins. That's plain and simple. You're going to get their best shot, their best defense, their best scheme to go and compete against her, and they still haven't been able to slow her down. And that's just part of it. And a part of that is creativity from the coaching standpoint. Karen Aston, I cannot give her enough credit. She is the straw that stirs the drink for UTSA. Maybe it's a margarita because they're down there on the Riverwalk and they've got the Tex-Mex surrounding them. She's the straw that stirs the margarita for Texas or UTSA right now down in San Antonio, Texas. Here's the thing, though. I mentioned those teams that they've beaten. Their next 4 games, starting this week, Tulsa, team that won the regular season sharing of a title last year. South Florida, preseason favorites in the American this year. Temple, who shared that regular season title last year and is currently tied for, or at least only one loss in conference play. And then North Texas, who's in second place in the conference right now and also shared the regular season title. Gauntlet. They have got a tough schedule coming up over these next couple of weeks, and they've got a huge weight on their back of trying to make it happen and continuing the 7-0 run. They're going to get the best shot from everyone now.
Absolutely.
Plain and simple.
Oh, 100%. And Gauntlet is the best way to describe that. And, you know, when I take a look at all of those teams, I think I look at it, it reminds me of similar to like Memphis on the men's side. Mm-hmm. We saw Temple men upset Memphis, and it's the same thing with them is they're getting everybody's best game. UTSA on the women's side right now is getting everybody's best game. We even saw Memphis on the women's side give them a game, who's right now at the lower part of the
probably
conference.
Should have won that game.
Yeah,
there were a couple mistakes late, and Memphis had a late technical on a rollback down the floor that probably shouldn't have put UTSA at the free throw line, and if they don't do that, Memphis might win that game, and then all of a sudden we're talking about 3-1 lost teams at the top of the standings.
And I think the thing, though, with UTSA, though, is they're very well aware of that, right? They know that they have the target on their back, and I was looking at a press conference from Jordyn Jenkins, and she said, look, we knew that this was coming, right? We want to get to the tournament. That's what we're looking forward to. That's what we have to keep doing. That's what we have to keep. We just have to keep going in that direction. And so I think that they have their eye on that prize. And I think that's going to help them in this next gauntlet of games. But I think it's going to be a big test. And I'm excited to break it down then with you when they're finished with that gauntlet to kind of see, all right, where does UTSA stack up against these other teams that are really good in the American?
Another team inside the Lone Star State that you have to keep an eye on when talking about the American is the North Texas Mean Green. A 6-1 start to conference play. It's the third time they've had it in program history, and it's the second straight season they've done so. The other time in in North Texas history that they've had this much success to start conference play was back in the mid-'80s. So it was nearly 40 years in between year one and year two, or year two and year three now, of having a 6-1 conference. Starting to talk about the North Texas Mean Green, we have their official analyst on the ESPN side of things, Brian Burton, joining us now. Brian, great to talk with you. Love getting to work with you on these North Texas games. And, of course, you've got a great mindset whenever it comes to the conference, the nation as a whole. And this North Texas team is turning heads again. They did so last year in the first year of Jason Burton as head coach. This year might even be more significant with the way that they've started.
Yeah, very well could be. And thanks for having me on. Excited to talk some hoops and love working with Kyle as well. So, yeah, I think this team's a little bit different. I think they've had more adversity in a different way than maybe last year's team, from the offseason to players maybe not being in uniform, whether it be from injury or whatever reason, and then having some players sitting out. So they've had up to 4 starters either out for the season or out for a game in long stretches. And I think it was kind of in the balance. What's going to be the identity of this team? And from really the Tulsa game on, Kyler Deck was a starter leading them in minutes. He was out that game with a concussion, and then inserted former starter Jacques Lamore to the lineup. And from that point on, this team has really taken off. They found a second leading scorer. She's now top 10. Jacques Lamore is, along with preseason player of the year Misha Lampkin, who's number 5 in conference-only stats for scoring. So they have a great scoring punch. They have up to 6 players that have averaged double figures either in conference play or on the season. So they actually can score, but they're one of the best defensive teams in the conference as well. And I believe conference only, they're leading the league in rebounds. So they're playing at a high level, and this year's team, surprisingly, although not as talent abundant as maybe last year's team was with the newcomer of the year and the 6th woman of the year and 2 first-teamers, this team may even be better in the long run.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question, is the way they've been playing is probably more complete basketball despite missing Deani Robinson, who was the 6th player of the year last year. You mentioned her. Desiree King was as another player. Colonel, Desiree Colonel as another player that was one of the players to watch last year. Tamisha Lampkin stepped up in a big way. You get those transfers that you mentioned with Kyla Deck, despite her being out of the fold due to the concussion protocol. Why is this team playing such a high level of basketball, top to bottom, when they've gone through so much adversity and come out on the other side?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the hardest part of recruiting right now in college basketball is retention, bringing back great players. And their whole starting 5 has played together really for now. This is their 3rd year playing together. Now, they all haven't started and played these same roles, but I think it speaks to the culture of the program. I think it speaks to the player development. It speaks to the staff to be able to retain these talented players. And they've all experienced winning the championship. They know what that feels like. And then, again, you have a preseason player of the year type of player in Lampkin, and you have this many starters coming back.
Yeah.
I do think it bodes well for you. And, I think the battle-testedness, you just never know how a team's going to handle adversity, right? Everyone has preseason picks, and you have all this different recruiting talent that people bring in, but you never know how it's all going to come together. And I think this particular team has responded really well to adversity. They have a great cohesive unit, and kind of that power in less numbers and less depth has made them even more impactful. And then now that they've gotten Kyler Deck back and some of their younger players and new players have developed off the bench, they've kind of getting into some of their best basketball, which is really what it's all about. We saw Rice last year. They lost 5 in a row, and then they won 4 in a row to go win it. So UTSA was playing great basketball last year at the end of the year. They have a ton of retention, and now they're leading the league. So I think that retention plays a big factor, and then, again, how you handle adversity.
So this team's been able to handle that adversity, as you said, and you mentioned the retention, but there are the newcomers and there are some new faces. So you say that this team is cohesive. What's allowed them to be cohesive, especially with all those different people in the fold?
Yeah, I think again, you go back to like the familiarity, right? A new head coach comes in with all these ideas, this
Yeah.
premium gas only concept, but then you have success, and then when you have success, it kind of creates and breeds more success. I think they had a really good offseason. But I think again that the staff retention was big too. They have everyone back from the staff from last year, which again for college basketball fans, they may not think that's as big of a deal, but you look at the men's team on that side and they're playing some of their best ball too, and they have their entire staff back. So it just creates this cohesion, this clarity. You look at the players that have developed in the program, the Desiree Wootons, significantly better, Ariana Hardaway, significantly better, Anaya Johnson. All the players that returned from last year, so much better. You see Shadeja Brackens starting to play pretty well as well. And there's a Sports Center top 10 play right there that we got to call. That was a fun moment. But I think the combination of that and then the newcomers settling into their roles and understanding what is expected. You know, Shania Price made some big free throws against South Florida. I mentioned Shadeja Brackens had a monster game against Rice in some needed moments. Jalen Talley makes this three here in a big moment against Rice. So they're starting to get contributions. Kyler Deck was a starter. Now she's coming off the bench. So I think this team is unique in the fact they are gritty. They are a hard hat defensive minded team, but yet they're still number 2 in conference only stats and field goal percentage. They're number 2 in block shots. You know, they have 2 top 10 scorers. So they have this balance of being, as Kyle, you mentioned, an offensive team, but yet a very defensive minded team. And I think that defensive rebounding number being number 1 in the league, that allows them to play so fast that they like to play in transition. And then again, they're doing things like this, the pick sixes that get them easy points.
I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about the defense, and you mentioned a bunch of those players that have contributed to this Mean Green team, but I want to talk a little bit about Tamisha Lampkin and what she has meant to this North Texas squad, and you talked a little bit about her growth. What do you think's contributed to that?
Yeah, I think again, kind of just maturity. You know, she just turned 23, so that pays off a lot when you're that much older. And she's been in school now at North Texas. She's never moved. She's been there for a long time, but she has a different responsibility off the floor. She has a son that's a big part of her life and a big part of her responsibility. So she's not a typical college student. So that in itself, but I do think she's really stepped up big. And I think Desiree Colonel was more of the kind of Batman, if you will, last year, and Misha was kind of more in the Robin role, and now she has to play that Batman role. And I think the part she's grown from preseason is she's getting way less foul trouble. The Rice game, the fact that she didn't foul she didn't foul out the entire, she played every minute of the game. She played 40 minutes. She didn't pick up a foul the entire game. She's making her free throws at a high percentage, which is huge. North Texas is number 1 or number 2 in the conference and conference only stats for free throw percentage. So they're making their free throws. They get there at a high rate. But I think she's playing more of a full game. Last year, you just saw these spurts where she'd score 10 points in a row or 10 points in, a quarter. And you'd have these big outbursts. And you saw that early this season. But I feel like her focus is more a 40-minute focus. And you're also seeing her develop as a passer. She's playing away from the basket. She's turning the ball over less. So I think just an overall maturity, and she's getting comfortable playing in this kind of Batman role. And she's not chasing numbers. I think, to be a top 5 scorer as a preseason, she doesn't care where she finishes. She literally just wants to win. And I think that's a huge thing in this day and age of college basketball. Again, to have that retention, for her to come back was the biggest recruit they could get. And then her continue to develop and really just sell out for whatever it takes. She wants to win another championship. She experienced the Rice loss last year and some of those things that the UTSA losses. So she has some of these games circled, and she's very motivated to lead her team by example.
So you mentioned premium gas a little bit there. This is the second year of Jason Burton's tenure. This is the second year of North Texas in the American. Some people have heard it before. If you've watched a North Texas women's basketball game, you've probably heard that term. You've probably heard, if you're even looking at some of the social media, you've probably seen it somewhere. What the heck is premium gas? And can you please explain it for those who may not have known it to this point?
Yeah, the analogy that Coach Burton would give is his dream car. He'll give the example of his dream car. I'm forgetting what it is. But he said, when I get my dream car, I'm only going to put premium gas in it. And it's a concept and a mindset that they've embodied on the court and off the court of we want to show up with our best, as our best, and treat ourselves and this program like it is that Maserati sports car or whatever the case may be, where you're showing up to be your best every single day. There's a high standard, there's a high expectation, and then on the court they want to play fast. They want to play with this effort that says like, hey, we're gassed up with the best possible fuel. We're thinking the best thoughts. We're the best cohesion we can be, and kind of a cool concept. He's definitely into the, all coaches are always trying to find a way to motivate their team, right? You look at whoever it may be. You look at Dion. You look at this person over here. Every coach has their own mantras that kind of that rally the players. And I think even the dog mentality change that they get after the game and the top dog, all those little things that create buy-in and celebrate players doing the things that they want to embody as a program, I think is pretty smart, and you got to find creative ways to celebrate with these kids these days to keep them engaged too.
Maria's engaged. She loves it.
I am.
So,
I love a good mantra, a good analogy. Give me all of them. I will.
The top dog chain would look good on you, by the way.
I would run through a brick wall for a top dog chain. Like, I am putting that out there. I need that in my life. Maybe we should bring one on All American.
I'll be in North Texas. I'll be in Denton this weekend, Brian. We can make it happen.
All right.
We got to get Jason on the phone. We'll get it. We'll get a top dog chain over here. We'll make it happen. But you got to earn it too. We can't just give it to you.
Okay, so what do I need to do to earn the top dog chain?
How about have a great broadcast on the men's game
Wednesday,
the American Showcase, Temple, North Texas. You have a great sideline reporting broadcast. We'll give you the top dog chain. How about that?
Extra motivation.
I got to get permission. Remember, I'm not a decision maker here. Brian Burton is the decision maker here.
Okay.
So he's the decision maker. Jason's the decision maker. We got to get a consensus agreement that you deserve the top dog chain in order.
It's almost like a dunk contest. We got like a judge panel. I like
that.
Yeah. So we'll give at the end of the day. We'll hold up a sign and we'll see what happens here.
Okay.
Are you down for that, Brian?
I'm definitely down. You got to embody the dog mentality, though. You can't just be like you got to be in there really confident, have some fun.
I got this. I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm mentally going to prepare so hard for this game.
Good.
I mean, I usually do that anyway, but to a different level. I want that top dog.
Dogs
chain.
take it to a new level.
Whole new level.
There it is. Brian Burton joining us here. Brian, where can they find you as you continue your analysis? Because you're not just on the North Texas side of things. You cover basketball across the country.
Yeah, so social media, I've kind of been taking a little bit of a break on that this year, not as active as normal, just trying to really lock into it. But Coach Burton 13 is the easy place to find me. And North Texas sidelines for the women's basketball. You can catch me sometimes on some SMU or some Mountain West broadcasts as well. And you never know, could be coming to a game near you soon. So I could just be on your local game coming soon.
Check your local listings.
A game near you.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Brian, thanks for taking some time here on All American. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Here he goes. Brian Burton, he's incredible. He always has a great temperature of what's happening around him, whether it is at SMU or Mountain West action or North Texas as well. He's got a great connection there in the building and certainly uses it to his advantage. One thing that he talked about was the offensive prowess and having the North Texas side of things, just taking it to another level with players like Tamisha Lampkin and Ariana Hardaway and some of their other key pieces. The one thing that sticks out to me, and I know you've picked up on this because we've talked about it off air, the defense has been vastly improved from this year than it even was during their championship run in the regular season last year.
Well, and I think that's what you're looking for as a coach, right? You don't win the tournament last year. You're close. You have a great season. We talked about those numbers. The things that Brian Burton, see, I'm going to get confused. The things that Jason Burton has done at North Texas in just his short time there. But as a coach, you're constantly looking, okay, what's the next thing that we can do? It doesn't have to be anything huge, just small little adjustments. And I think the defense has really stepped up in a big way by just making minor adjustments, just being a little bit tougher. And you heard Brian say all of those different stats in which they're at the top of the American Conference. And I think you make those small little adjustments, and that's why you're 6-1 in conference play.
Well, and I think when you're looking at North Texas defensively, you've gotten to know them by the post play. Desiree Colonel last year, just a stretch four who could play up and down the floor and was very quick to run with the basketball. That's why they averaged 70 points per game last year and did so pretty much with ease. Tamisha Lampkin, still a presence on the low block down there for North Texas. They're both great players, and one of them still there, one of them has graduated. the additions that you've had with Kyla Deck. She was all WAC defensive team with Stephen F. Austin last year. Makes the transfer over. She's one of the best on-ball defenders in the conference, and she's helped elevate the sophomore Desiree Wooten's defense to a new level too. So you could argue they have two of the best on-ball defenders in the entire American. Then you look down low, you still have Tamisha Lampkin and what she can do from a shot blocking, a misdirection standpoint, a post-presence standpoint, and then you add in the other factor of another 6'2" forward in Anaya Johnson, who's had a great season defensively, starting to take a step forward offensively. As long as they stay out of foul trouble in the post, it allows for the guards to play at a high level and be a little more aggressive up at the perimeter, and it is basically 4 out of the 5 players on the floor, you've got to find some way around it. And they're going to go mano-a-mano. They're not going to double team a whole lot. There aren't really a ton of players. I think maybe Jordyn Jenkins is the only player that I would double team with North Texas at any point this season. That's just because of her versatility in her own right. North Texas is a legitimate problem. Let's just say it as 100%. Is. They're a problem.
Yes, and you kind of touched on it. You mentioned all those players and the way that they not only play well individually, but the way that they complement each other. And another team that's done that really well so far this year has been Temple. They're off to another really great start in conference play. Another team that was part of that three-way tie for first place in the American last year. Yeah, that's a good adjective.
A three-way kerfuffle.
Kerfuffle, I like that. 5-1 though to start conference play for the Owls. That's their best since 2016-17. So I think one thing that we're seeing a lot, especially on the women's side in the American, are these programs starting to turn the corner and creating a lot of competitiveness, especially at the top of the conference. I really like this team under Diane Richardson. They're another team that, I don't know, at the beginning of the year, people maybe counted them out a little bit, and I think they're playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder.
They definitely are. It goes back to what I said at the beginning of the show, but we're starting to see that the oil in the water, right? The oil in the what's the I don't even remember.
No, you're right. Oil and water.
Is it oil and water?
There's a song. They just don't mix.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yes.
So you're starting to see kind of the separation here. The teams that are rising to the top and the teams that aren't necessarily they're in the bottom. Temple was the team that was kind of muddied up initially, and now they're at the top. And they're playing like it this year. A lot of people like you said, they were underestimated. Just look at the preseason poll when they were picked to finish 8th out of the 13 teams in the American. Yet they're tied for tied for second, and they're right there in the thought process with North Texas and South Florida. The one key there is they've lost to South Florida. They will play North Texas coming up next week in Denton. They're not going to be able to hide now. Right? The schedule is what the schedule is, and it's very backloaded for Temple. Not saying they haven't had quality wins. They've certainly had quality wins like Florida Atlantic, Tulsa, Charlotte, and they've really taken care of business. I'm worried about the depth. The depth of this team is a little bit spotty for me. You've got, and I haven't called a game of theirs yet, so forgive me if I mispronounce the name, Terriana. Is it Terriana Gray?
Gary.
Gary. So Terriana Gary is their go-to scorer. She's phenomenal. Probably going to be an all-conference honoree if I had to guess, and if she continues that play. Outside of Gary and then Turner, who's also playing at a high level, where do you get the scoring from? They only go to about 8 deep in their bench. They rotate a couple of those players. Those 8 are very good, and that's why they're winning games and they're 5-1 in conference play. But when they go up against these teams like North Texas, we just talked about the depth of the Mean Green, where they can go 10, 11 players deep and feel very confident about that. Against South Florida, where they go 10, 11 players deep and feel confident about it. Can Temple keep pace along the way? They've got the high-end talent to do it. I'm a little concerned about the depth, despite how good they've been so far, and I cannot take anything away from Coach Richardson. She's been fantastic. And remember, this is a program that had Don Staley roaming the sidelines for almost a decade in Philadelphia. They have a ton of talent, and they have a ton of tradition. I'm not underselling what they've done so far. I'm just looking ahead to see what they have next.
And I'll agree with you, but also counter you in a little bit.
Sure.
I think the answer to your question is I think that they're going to generate that offense based off of their defense. If you watch them play, no, they're not in the top in a lot of different categories defensively. defensively. But the thing about them is they're very aggressive. They'll double a lot. They're not afraid to try to take some risks. And I think that's where we've seen some of their offense generate from.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that you do have people like Terriana Gary, Tiara East has been playing well also. She's been able to score the basketball. And so I think that they kind of have that, talking about what Commissioner Tim Pernetti calls the American, that lunch bucket mentality, like show up, do the hard work, do the grittiness.
Does he call it a lunch bucket?
Lunch pail.
Lunch pail? Okay, I was
like,
about to say, I was like, what is a lunch bucket?
Well, technically.
That sounds a little more hardcore, so maybe that's accurate.
I've called it a lunch bucket before. What did you pack when you would go to elementary school?
I mean, like a lunch box or a lunch pail.
Did you have a Vera Bradley one?
Oh, absolutely.
I know.
Yeah.
Me too. I had it in like two different patterns. Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know why we're talking about that.
I don't think our younger audience would know what we're talking about with the Vera Bradley lunch boxes. But anyway, I digress. Temple is a lunch pail, Vera Bradley lunch box. Take it to school. They're tough. They're Temple tough. That's their.
You just said they carry Vera Bradley. I don't even know that's how you say it.
Only the coolest girls in school carried Vera Bradley.
Temple is one of the coolest girls in school, for sure.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
Continue.
I digress. I just think they're incredibly tough. I think that, yes, they haven't played that more difficult part of their schedule yet, but I think the fact that they won the games that they're supposed to win, right? They lost to South Florida. I still think they're starting to score a little bit more. Nothing drastic, but when you look at those last 3 wins, they're all in the 70s, even the 80s. Before that, they were scoring in the 60s. They had that one outlier game against UAB where I think they dropped like 97.
Yeah, they put up a ton of points.
It was insane. So I think that there's some promise here for this Temple Owls team, and they're winning games. No, they haven't played the top part of the conference yet, but they're in that top part of the conference. So I expect them to do well, but I think it comes from playing some tenacious defense with their lunch buckets, pails, whatever you want to call them.
And this is a huge compliment to Temple because, and I hate to bring up North Texas for like the 3rd time already in the show, but they remind me of the North Texas men's team a little bit with the way that they slow the pace of the game down. They are toward the bottom half of the country in terms of possessions and tempo, and they're okay with that. They love that. They want to take time away from the shot clock. They want to roll with every possession and make every possession more valuable because they do believe in their defense. They believe in the turnover ability and winning the turnover margin and having
they have
the
best
ability.
Turnover margin in the conference.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah. The way that they are able to do it, and you can see it on film, they run out of the half court and they continuously pester you on defense. That turns into their offense, like you said, and at times it will allow them to score 70 points or 75 points or even the 90 that they put up against UAB. But for the most part, they're happy settling in the mid-60s. As long as their opponent's in the 50s. Yeah. And that's kind of where they're headed, is they want to continue to take the air out of the basketball, continue. They don't have a ton of rotation. Like I said, they've got about 8 players total. Their defense-first mentality, that slower pace of play, all kind of adds together to give them success and allows them to go shallow in their rotation. One player I would like to highlight, Jalisa Molina. Again, I haven't called a game of theirs yet. Steady hand down low. Forward player. 6'2". She's basically a double machine. She's right around a double per game
this season, right?
Yeah, she's been very, very good for them. And I mentioned how Gary and Turner are kind of the go-to players. Molina is that X factor for me. If she can stretch the floor, if she can run the ball out of the high post like they've used her from a general sense throughout the season, Jalisa Molina is going to play at a very high level. And this is a Temple team that I think will go as Molina will allow them to.
Yeah, I mean, you look at her numbers against Charlotte. She's 5 for 5 on field goals. That's the first thing that stands out to me, in addition to, dropping 15 points. But as you said, she has the ability to not only do things offensively, she does a great job on the boards as well. And when you're talking about
great defender,
when you're talking about a great defensive team, you need somebody like Molina to help you out there.
Especially in this conference. In this conference, you play against these highly athletic forwards like Tamisha Lampkin and Jordyn Jenkins that we've mentioned already. You're going to play against these super athletic, super skilled ball handling forwards, and Molina can handle that from a defensive standpoint. It's going to take Temple a long way. Now, I want to go from Temple to Tulane, a little bit of a switch. We're going from Philadelphia to New Orleans. I like what we've seen so far from the Tulane Green Waves. Of course, they're in a brand new opportunity. Coach Ashley Langford, first year with the program, returns home to where she played her collegiate basketball and already one win away from surpassing their entire win total from last year and one conference win above their entire conference win total last year. It's been a special season for for Tulane. And we talked about Jason Burton. They were the surprise. North Texas was the surprise of last year's American Conference. Tulane is the surprise of this year's.
Well, I think it's always so special when you have a coach come back to their alma mater.
It's different, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, I think about just when I've gotten to call games at my alma mater, and that's just something that's really special for me. So I can't even imagine getting to represent the university that built you, that made you, and that's something that Ashley Langford talked about.
She was a great player, too.
Oh, my goodness. She was fantastic.
Yeah.
And
all conference,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Scholar Athlete of the Year as a senior. So she definitely had an impact while she was there. And I just think that was one thing that she talked about, too, when she got the job. She said that Tulane's always had a special place in her heart and that it's meant so much to her as a person and her development. And so when you have that little extra added why, you know that there's going to be something brewing there in New Orleans. And she's already started it. It's her first year, and we've talked about the success that team has had. And I think the cool thing about it is she's kind of taken players from the transfer portal brought with her from Stony Brook. And so you have those players starting to make an impact. And then you have players that were already at Tulane that are starting to score as well. And so you have 5 players averaging in double figures. And I think when you have that combination, it makes for a pretty good roster for the Green Wave.
The thought process, too, when you do return home is you know what the type of player you're going to get is, right?
Yep.
You know the limitations, you know the pros, the cons, what you're getting walking in the door. Because even when you graduate and you go on and you have a coaching career at places like Stony Brook where Langford started her career, you still kind of keep tabs, keep an eye on what is Tulane doing? What is my alma mater doing? You always do that. And so you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. So like you talked about, bringing a player along like Pittman, who's leading the way in scoring right now for Tulane. You bring in a number of players who have these, maybe the starts and the experience and the play, not the high numbers, because a lot of those players that are experienced and have unbelievable numbers are probably going to go to another spot other than Tulane. Right. But she knows that she can get high-level, high-disciplined players to come in and put up some scoring. And that's why you see stats like this where you have 5 different players averaging in double figures. Plus, they want to get up and down the floor. They like to run the ball down the floor and put up points. They've done so throughout the year. The most impressive win of their entire season for me was the way they dominated North Texas.
Right.
They were up by 20 points at the break almost. They were up 18 at the break. North Texas comes storming back. The Mean Green take a 5-point advantage halfway through that fourth quarter, and then Tulane just shuts it down. Just said, nope, never mind. We're going to protect home court. They've had some ups and downs. They've had that win against North Texas, super impressive win. But then you fall to teams like East Carolina and Memphis, probably games you should win based off of the way you started your conference slate. So the jury is still out on this Tulane team, but they're talented and they've got the coaching to do it.
Here's a couple things, too, for me that really stand out about this team is the experience on it. So Kendall Sneed is the outlier. She's a freshman, and she's been phenomenal, right? Averaging in double figures. But you have somebody like Kyron Whittington, who's been at Tulane for a bit now, and then you bring over with you just some of those other players from Stony Brook that we mentioned. Sharice Pittman, I think this is her sixth year playing college basketball. Victoria Keenan as well. She was at Seton Hall and then at Stony Brook with Langford. And so you have that experience. So when you talk about, Kyle, that North Texas game where they just shut things down when North Texas came back, that's veteranship to me, right? Yeah. That's when you've been in that situation before and you don't crumble. So I think if they can get more consistent and those veterans can lead the way, I like what the Green Wave has to offer. So I think they're right on the cusp of it. But again, it's a first-year head coach, and there are some young players, and there are still trying to gel, and that's where those losses to Memphis or East Carolina come from. But I don't know. I think if they can play like they did against North Texas and lean on some of that experience and keep building under Langford, something exciting might be happening down there in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think they're kind of the start of the next tier team for me. I think the front runners in this conference are UTSA, of course, they're undefeated. South Florida still, I don't want to count out the Bulls, even though they have their 2 losses. And then I would probably put Temple and North Texas in there too. Those are kind of the 4 front runners right now. Tulane is right there on the cusp. They're not far outside of that top 4, in my opinion. They're currently 5th in the standings, so that's about right. But they were picked to finish 10th in the standings. So
exactly.
They're overachieving right now. They're going to go through some tough stretches. They've got to get a couple of those teams. I know the teams that they've beaten already, they've got to turn around and get them at home later in the campaign. I know what are some of the teams they play late at home? Tulsa, they got to play on the road. They've got to play Temple at home, UTSA at home. South Florida is their next matchup coming up this week. So there's a lot of back and forth that you're going to have to continue to win if you're this Tulane team, and they've done a good job of doing so far.
Yeah, and another team that showed out a little bit this week, you mentioned South Florida losing to UAB.
Yeah.
So we're talking a little bit about Tulane and how they're right on the cusp, and UAB, we're not really sure where they're falling yet, but they go 1-1 this week. They beat South Florida in Tampa, and they lose to the only team that's undefeated in conference play in UTSA.
Lost by 10 to UTSA, and that was a game, again, I know we've already talked about UTSA, but Jordyn Jenkins put up 21 points and hit half of her shots from the field, and it was just kind of a big game. But the way that they beat South Florida was coming off of a loss, their first conference loss against North Texas on the road. They go back home to the Yuengling Center, and you kind of thought UAB would be the punching bag at that point.
Yeah.
Not the case. USF jumped out quick. The South Florida Bulls had 19 points in the first quarter. UAB answered back almost immediately, outscored them in the second and the third to really open up the lead, and then held off a late charge from the Bulls, no pun intended. But we mentioned the high-end talent of some of these teams and the front runners and the starters. They have that. They have Jade Weathersby, who's been around for quite some time, kind of a family-oriented thought process. Her sister, I believe, played for UAB a couple years ago and had a great career. They've got Journey Armstead, who had 16 points and 4 rebounds in that win against South Florida. But then they've got the deep bench mentality. Alicia Carter was tremendous. Hit 4 threes, had 5 assists, 4 rebounds, and 16 points in that win against South Florida. They don't win that game without Carter and what she brought from a catalyst standpoint off the bench. She ended up playing 28 minutes off the bench and was just top-notch. Sarah Bershers, who has also had a great career with UAB, didn't have her best game, only played in 6 minutes throughout that game. And then you had Carter come in and just lit it up. And that's the type of game that this Blazers team needed.
Yeah, and it's all about who's going to step up when somebody else doesn't have it. And so you see that play out for UAB. And when you're talking about depth, just getting more people involved and getting people off the bench to come in and have a hot hand and then playing to that hot hand as well. And I think the biggest thing that you see when you see somebody at the top of the conference playing one of these maybe middle of the pack teams right now, again, it's still very early.
Yeah.
We saw the way that the American women's basketball standings looked at the end of the season last year. Middle of the pack, the oil and water analogy, I don't know if that was applicable in 2023-24, but in terms of UAB, you're trying to figure out who are some of those go-to players when your top performers aren't hitting shots, aren't playing to their level, and you saw a little bit of that. Now, UAB's won their last 3 games after a little bit of a shaky, rocky start, so they could be turning that corner, and they're going to hope that they are moving into this next couple of games.
I like you mentioned the experience from Tulane and kind of the cohesiveness. We heard that from Brian about North Texas. UAB has experience in cohesiveness. I mentioned Weathersby. I mentioned Bershers. They have some other players that have been around for a little bit as I look at their roster. Walsh has been there forever, and she's had a great career. I think that's going to be something that come tournament time, no matter what seed the Blazers are, watch out for UAB, because that's when your experience comes into fruition, when you got to win 3 or 4 games over the course of 3 or 4 days to continue your season and continue playing along. And they've got these seniors and these upperclassmen that have been around Birmingham for quite some time. Even Molly Moffitt, I know she's a Seattle native, but she's played for UAB the last couple of years too. So I'm interested to see how they'll respond through the back half of conference play. But right now, I've seen bits and pieces. That South Florida win was a high. You've seen some lows at the same time. Keep the steady hand of that experience and then ride it in a conference or into tournament time. All of a sudden, you might have a bit of a dark horse.
And here's the thing with them. It's their record doesn't look like the UTSA undefeated or some of those teams at the top of the conference.
Yeah.
They're second in the American in scoring.
Yep.
They lead in field goal percentage. Third in three-point field goal percentage. Just look at some of those stats. The numbers
They hit
say
a lot of threes.
Right. The numbers say that they have the possibility of being a very good team. Now they just have to take those numbers and translate them into wins. And I think when you have that part of it kind of figured out, right? They're scoring the basketball. Can they translate it into tallies in the win column?
Well, and they've won 3 of their last 4. Their next couple games are against Rice. That's a tough matchup, but a winnable game. At Wichita State, maybe a little reverse or a little revenge on the mind as Wichita State beat them earlier in the season. Then they go on the road against Tulane, East Carolina. I mean, this is a gauntlet of a conference. There's no easy days in the American. But you see the opportunity. If you can win 3 or 4 of these next 3 or 4 games, then all of a sudden you're up there in that same conversation, and you're helping pace things along, just like we talked about with those 4 front runners in the early going. From UAB to the team that they beat, South Florida, what do we think about the South Florida Bulls? I said it earlier. I haven't given up on them yet. They're so talented, top to bottom.
Yeah, I'm not really concerned. I mean, I know they lost to UAB. They lost to North Texas, but North Texas is a really good team. We just got done talking about that. Even the way UAB is playing, and they beat Duke. You don't beat Duke by accident.
Duke.
Yeah, you don't beat them by accident. I think they have all the tools. They have healthy players. I think there's even like Romy Levy coming off the bench at different points. I think the fact that you can even say that just tells you the caliber of players that they have on this roster. I think they just hit a little bump in the road. And for me, like this is my weird former athlete superstitious mind. Like, give me the losses now. Because that means we're going to peak at the end of the season.
Ramp up at the end of the year.
My biggest anxiety as a player was when we would sweep a team in conference play.
And then see them in the tournament.
You had to see them in the... You can't beat somebody 4 times, like in my mind. I mean, maybe
you can, but
you can, but it's really hard. So I remember like one of our rivals, like they beat us one of the conference series games. Good. Love it. That gives me, I don't want to go undefeated in conference play. I mean, I feel like all coaches are sitting here listening to me like I'm a psychopath.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. I want to win every game.
I mean, I want to win every game too, but I'm just saying it worked for me. Like conference championship wise, it all panned out. So I think I'm going to stick with my theory.
You got the jewelry to show it.
I got 4 rings to prove it. It's fine. So I'm gonna stick with my mentality on that one. And softball's a little bit different than basketball. There's a lot more games you play. So again, maybe this isn't a great comparison. Again, I'm getting on another tangent. But to go back to your question about South Florida, I'm not worried about them. I think they're one of the best teams in the conference. I think they have some of the best individual players in this league, and I think that they're going to be just fine. They just have to figure out how to get consistent again.
Their guard play is next level. They've got some crazy good guard play. They've got scorers all over the floor. Sammy Puisis is as good of a three-point shooter as you'll see in the country right now. I mean, she's just electric from downtown. I like what they've seen, or what we've seen from Victoria Blazik throughout the year at times. She's been good. What they don't have is that post presence where, I mean, you've got some, even their 4s and their forwards can continue to run the floor, and they get up and down, and they're really quick and really athletic. Brito being one of them, Blazik the second one, and then you mentioned Levy, preseason co-player of the year, hasn't had the year that she's anticipated, but most of that's because she's come off the bench and provided a spark off the bench for Coach Fernandez. So when I look at South Florida, I look at a team, like you said, made up of really good individuals. I don't see the team basketball every night. I see it at times. I see it whenever they beat Duke. I see it whenever they're challenging some of these other teams along the way. I don't see it all the time. And in a conference like this, we just ran through the schedule. If you're going to beat UAB, if you're going to beat North Texas, if you're going to beat Temple and Tulane and East Carolina and UTSA, you got to be perfect. And right now they're not. Will they click at the right time? Kind of to go along with your point, I think they will. And because of that talent and because of their shooting, I think when the tournament comes around, you got to look out for South Florida. right now in this stretch, they've got to settle down. They got to settle down. There's a lot of times where they're out of rhythm on the offensive end. They're trying to do too much. There's too much ball movement. There's too much weaving. They love that perimeter post-to-post play where they're running in the high post and they're trying to wait for somebody to get lost in the shuffle defensively. Teams have picked up on that. You got to get creative offensively and start to run these sets in a more efficient manner. And then you'll start to see the Bulls start to resurge. They've got the tough schedule at Tulane, at East Carolina, and then they get 2 at home against UTSA and North Texas. Bang, bang.
Talk about a gauntlet. Literally, if you could write a worse gauntlet, I don't think you could at this point in where those teams are, especially on the road. And then, okay, you're home against the 2 best teams in the league right now.
Yeah, and I think that's got to be a go-to mentality for South Florida. They got to go hard at feeding their go-to players, their go-to scorers. And you got to get in there and have some success on the road. You got to have some success at home, and then keep on rocking from that point forward. So it's a tough matchup on the horizon. But South Florida, I think, as we outlined, they're super talented, top to bottom. I'm not super worried about what they're going to bring to the table. All right, South Florida to Tulsa. Next team up. Another one of the teams that finished tied in the American regular season last year. When I'm talking about South Florida and North Texas and Temple, I left out Tulsa as a true contender in the conference right now. And that's just because of some of the lapses. It seems like when they don't shoot the ball well, that's when I have some questions.
Right.
They've got to shoot the ball well.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting numbers that we looked at is 5 of 6 of their American games have been decided by 9 points or less, right? So that's why we're not putting them at their 8 games decided by 9 or less, 5 of 6 in conference play. But I think when we're not putting them at this moment in that top part of the oil and water analogy. Separation, because we're unsure, but they're right there. They're right on the cusp. And I think, as you're saying, if they can shoot the ball a little bit better, and here's my thing, it's not only can you shoot the basketball a little bit better, and those are the games that you're going to win, those games when you're not shooting the ball well, how are you going to compensate for that? Are you going to play a little bit tougher defense? Are you going to are you going to steal the basketball and create more points in that aspect? Are you going to just do the little things, maybe get some hard-fought layups, figure out how to drive the lane a little bit more, get fouled, different things like that? Because this is a game of averages, and the thing is some days you can be the best shooter in the country and you can go 0 for one night, and there's just nothing that you can really do about it. And so I think it's less for me, to your point, of they're good when they shoot the basketball. For me, it's what are you going to do when you don't shoot the basketball well? Yeah,
and their rebounding hasn't helped them out a ton. They're negative in the rebounding margin. Their field goal percentage doesn't look bad on paper. They're shooting an even 40% from the field, but they're allowing their opponents to hit 39%. So it's not really that much of a discrepancy one way or the other. And Tulsa kind of reminds me of that Rice team from last year. A little bit of that Rice team, because you have the high-end, all-conference-esque type of talent with Delaney Crawford. She's incredible. She's a great player.
Great.
Outside of Tamisha Lampkin and Jordyn Jenkins, I think Delaney Crawford's probably my number 3 vote for player of the year, because she does a little bit of everything. You talked about what do you do when you're not shooting the rock well. She does it pretty much every night in, night out. And, oh, by the way, she only has 2 games underneath 10 points of total production. So usually she shoots the ball pretty well. Super creative scorer, overall competitor. Got to see her up close and personal a couple weeks ago, and she just does not quit. She has got a high motor, high mentality, and a great shooting stroke too. Crawford is an elite player. Outside of that, they have to find some heady stabilization along the way, because it's been Elise Hill, it's been Maddie Cartwright, the other 2 leading scorers along the way, but neither one of them are consistent enough to really have confidence moving forward. Shoot the ball more efficiently. I think they'll have a better opportunity. I feel this is tough for me, because I think they're a good team. I do.
Well, here, I'm going to point this out to you.
Look, give me an opportunity
those
here.
three losses, UTSA, Temple, North Texas.
Top-notch teams.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the gauntlet that South Florida's about to face, or we talked about other teams who haven't faced those
Even
top...
UTSA,
yes,
they're about to face those teams too.
Exactly. So, and they've lost those games by small margins. And so I don't think that their record is indicative of the kind of team that they are. I think that they are better than we think they are. They've won the games that they're supposed to win. They've beat Charlotte. They've beaten Florida Atlantic. They've beat those teams that are on that cusp. So they're right in the middle of our oil and water split.
You're making me feel a little better about this.
Yeah.
I like what their team has, top to bottom.
I think
they've got some depth. They rotate well. They just don't rebound very well, and they don't shoot the ball consistently. Let's say it that way. There are some games where they just light it up.
Yeah. And the thing is, despite all of that, they're still in games. And their losses are to the top teams in the conference that we just got saying we're so complete teams, have played really well all season, are playing some of their best basketball. And so they're winning the games that they're supposed to win. And they're coming close to the games that they maybe could win, should win. So
be up there, yeah.
Jury's still out on it, but I'm not counting the Golden Hurricane out just yet.
Where South Florida and North Texas and UTSA have won their games, Tulsa has not.
Exactly.
That's where Tulsa's going to take a step forward.
Yep.
Is at that point. When tournament time, again, they're going to be dangerous. I can't say everybody's going to be dangerous, but they are.
Kyle's like, everybody will
Watch out. It's tournament time.
Listen,
anything can happen.
Listen,
it's
true.
It
really
is.
Last year showed it. It's, not only just in the conference tournament, but it's literally called March Madness for a reason.
It is madness.
It's complete madness, and we love it.
I think Tulsa, they're right there in that middle group with Tulane, that are two teams that are good enough to be in the top tier but just haven't done it yet.
Yep.
That's kind of where I'm at. And I think there's a chance that one of those teams from the top get bumped down, whether that's UTSA or Temple or North Texas.
We don't know yet.
Those teams are going to shuffle around and kind of happen from there forward. Yep. Speaking of, we've got a big schedule on the horizon. Lots of great games over the next few weeks in the American as we take a look at some of our notable matchups coming up. And Tulsa's got a couple big ones. Speaking of opportunities, you got the Tulsa UTSA matchup coming up on Wednesday, and then Saturday they take on Memphis at home. So lots on the line for the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. What are the other games you want to look at here?
I like that Temple Tulane game.
That's a big game.
That's a big game because I think that's going to tell us a lot about both of those teams. I think that Tulane has an opportunity to say, yep, we're in that top half, and Temple needs to just prove like, yep, we're in the top half and we deserve to be here. That one, I have that one circled in addition to the ones that you mentioned. And there's even more games on this second page. And here I'm looking at that Temple North Texas, of course. And I'm saying a lot of Temple games, but it's just the other
Temple's the dark horse of this.
They
whole thing.
They are, and they're playing some of those other top teams that we talked about. So I have a lot of those circled. All the Temple games on this page too, North Texas and UTSA, because I want to be convinced on those teams as well. I think I'm convinced. Jordyn Jenkins, as we talked about, fantastic. North Texas, one of their best seasons again this year, but how do they fare against those other teams that are having really good years as well? We
got to wait a little bit because they only play once, and it's down in San Antonio. But right now, the game that I would have circled as the game of the year on the women's side, North Texas in UTSA.
Yeah.
That's the game of the year. These two are going to decide whether or not that reigns true, because I think Temple will beat one of those two teams.
Yeah.
We'll see which one it ends up being. But right now, as it sits today, as we record here inside Studio A, I would say North Texas at UTSA is the game of the year. And we'll have a couple weeks up until that point, so we'll break it down as we get there closer. But speaking of one of the go-to players from UTSA, we've mentioned Jordyn Jenkins a lot. Right now, she's the best player in the conference, and you had the chance to catch up with her earlier this week.
Just recognizes where everybody's supposed to go. Such a maestro with the basketball in her hands.
Oh, my goodness, they're on fire now. Jordyn Jenkins.
The maestro with the basketball is, I believe, what they just called you, Jordyn. Welcome to All-American. Again, this is Jordyn Jenkins from UTSA. We're so excited that you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
We're going to talk a little bit about you. You are currently the leading scorer in the American Athletic Conference. But before we get to your individual accolades, let's talk a little bit about this UTSA team. You're undefeated in conference play, one of your best starts since 2008-2009. So what has been working well for your RoadRunners?
I think we've just grown a lot since I've come here as a player, and all of our young kids are now upperclassmen. So I think there's just been a lot of growth and a lot of commitment to the program to get where we are now. It's taken a few years to get here, but a lot of growth and hard work.
You've definitely seen that growth play out. And as you said, those younger kids getting older each and every year. What do you think it is, though, about this team that has helped you grow so efficiently? Because sometimes people are in places for a long period of time and nothing really happens, but things seem to finally be clicking for you.
Yeah, I think mainly our coaching staff has been a huge help to keeping this dream becoming a reality. Karen Aston has been so adamant on how good we could possibly be. So, it's just a lot of positive, things that she puts into our brains to allow us to be the best that we can be. And it's also, our team camaraderie, and we have a lot of chemistry on and off the court. So it helps out.
You mentioned Karen Aston. She certainly has been fun to watch coach you and your team. I've listened to a couple of her press conferences, and the one thing that really sticks out to me is just the way that she describes the tenacity of your team and the way that she calls people to come to your games because she says that you're exciting to watch. What has it been like playing for her?
She's the reason why I'm here, and she's the reason why I made the decision to come here, because I believed in what she believed in, and I knew that I could be the best person I could be here. And yeah, I mean, she's the reason why I've become a better player on the court. And, she's been making me go to different spots and just trying to help the team out in, different ways since I am such a bit of a problem on the court. So yeah, she's just the best.
You're definitely a bit of a problem for opposing teams. As we already said, you're leading the American in scoring. What do you think it is about this year that has helped you elevate your game?
I would say just, getting in the gym a lot in the off season and, trying to develop a mid-range jumper. That's one of the hardest ways to score is getting in the mid-range and getting into the paint and pulling up. So I've just been trying to work on my pull-up and my shot just to really draw defense out and, just also get my teammates open for opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think you've done a really great job of that. You mentioned the way that you're able to score in so many different ways and also getting your teammates open. Now, you have a little bit of a target on your back individually because of the way that you've been scoring the basketball. So how much of responsibility do you feel to your team to be able to still perform despite having, people target you a bit more?
Yeah, I'm just going back to the growth that, I've had to endure, and being a fifth year senior, I'm used to the physicality and, people trying to take me out of the game. My teammates and even my family are like, last year you would have been mad, on the court or whatever. But, I get the bigger picture now, and I get what we're going for. So just trying to stay calm in those situations, whenever I'm getting doubled or, just trying not to turn the ball over, just making smart decisions.
What is the bigger picture?
We want to cut the net down, and, we want a championship. So that's all we're going for.
I think that's a pretty good goal to have. Now, to be able to do that, you have to get past some of those tough teams in the conference. Obviously, you're sitting at the top of the American right now, but you have teams like South Florida, North Texas, who are also playing really well. So as you look ahead to those games, and I know most people, one game at a time, but as you look ahead to those opponents, how do you prepare for them? What do you think about in that sense?
Well, I am a one game at a time kind of person, especially because of, we're being undefeated right now. So it's just important to just keep your head and know that you have to win that specific game that day. But yeah, I know that we still have, like you said, North Texas, Temple, South Florida, and Tulsa, who we're playing tomorrow. So those are 4 games that are going to be pretty tough. And Tulsa's the only team that we've played already. So we still haven't yet proved ourselves because we haven't played everybody yet. So we just got to stay level-headed and know that these teams are out to get us, and they don't want us to be undefeated anymore. So we have to want it more than them.
Absolutely. And one more quick question before we let you go. One thing that Karen Aston has talked a lot about was playing at home and getting people to come and watch you. So what would your cry to UTSA fans or people in the area be? Why should they come watch the RoadRunners play at home this season?
They should come and watch us play because we've been doing such a good job so far this season. I know we're really entertaining to watch. This team has a lot of chemistry that we have fun on the court. So I know that, everyone else will enjoy it. So just come see something that is all about greatness.
I know we've been enjoying watching from afar. Hopefully we'll get to San Antonio to see a game in person. Jordyn, thank you so much for joining All-American today.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
Always fun catching up with Jordyn Jenkins, one of the best talents in the American. And right now, my vote for Player of the Year. Nobody has asked me yet to give my vote yet. I don't know why, but we'll get there at some point down the line.
One day.
But she's been incredible, of course, averaging nearly 20 points per game, and you could hear the excitement that she has around what they're doing down in San Antonio.
I think my biggest thing that I took away from her was just the growth that she talked about, not just for her individually, but for that entire UTSA team. And I think she gives so much credit to Karen Aston, and I think that was something that I really like to hear because I think we see it from the outside, right?
I said it earlier in the show. Karen Aston is the reason this whole thing is working.
Yep. And so she just has so much respect for her and what she's helped Jordyn with as a player, but also that entire team. So I'm excited to see what that UTSA team does as the season goes along. But we talked a lot about a bunch of different teams, and so now we get to have a little bit more fun and take a look at some of our top plays from the week.
Let's do some of the top plays. Let's start things off in New Orleans. How about this? Tulane. We talked about their prowess on the offensive side of the glass. Behind the back pass, Ashley Langford has this green wave rolling as of late. That's Mabry who lays it up, but it was Sadie Shores with the push behind the back. An incredible pass, the vision, the awareness to make it happen, an incredible feed for the two.
And the alliteration, Sadie Shores with the behind the back pass. And passing with perfection was something that was a big theme this entire week in American Conference basketball. This is Charlotte and Memphis. Giancarlo Rosado has the ball at the top of the key. He's got to get rid of it. How about a no-look to Robert Braswell? I think that one worked out pretty well.
A little backdoor cut off of the short corner, baseline drive. He's sitting out there in the corner. He said, you know what, let me take off. And then the no-looker to make sure that the defense is pulled away and brought it to the perimeter. Really nicely done all the way through for Charlotte and the 49ers as they continue to fight their way through a rocky start to conference play. All right, how about this? Ariana Hardaway. I was on the call for this matchup.
I was going to say, this voice sounds familiar.
Yeah, I just might as well stop talking and let it take it all the way through. But that's Ariana Hardaway. Reverse lay-in. Did not touch the rim. Did not touch the backboard. It's a high-arcing Steph Curry-esque shot. This one actually landed on ESPN SportsCenter as the number 8 play of the day. I don't know how it's number 3 in this countdown. I don't know who writes this top 5.
I don't know who writes it
I don't know
either.
Who does this.
Yeah,
but
they
it
should have made it number 1. It should have been up
Should have been higher, but that's okay. Ariana Hardaway and that North Texas team continue to roll. They get the big win over Rice.
All right, let's take a look at what was number 2 that was above that Hardaway one, which, again, we don't know who makes these.
I don't know who makes this.
This was a top 25 upset. Shane Dezzoni over not 1, but 2 Memphis Tigers and the Owls walking away victorious in this one.
Such a great play and a big victory for the Owls at home in a whiteout in Philadelphia. They have over 2,000 wins in their program's history, one of 6 programs to do so. They get it because of talent like Dezzoni, a returning player that they've had step up in a big way off the bench this year for the Temple Owls. They're going to have some fun this week taking on North Texas in our American basketball showcase that we mentioned earlier. I had the opportunity last year to watch a lot of East Carolina. I called a bunch of their games for the East Carolina Radio Network. RJ Felton is a dude. Here he is again at the buzzer to strike gold against Wichita State on the road. RJ Felton's about as clutch as they come. Contested 3, no problem. End of the clock, no problem. Buzzer sounds, he gets it. They make the Shockers walk the plank for the win.
I loved that.
Thanks.
Walk the plank. That was good alliteration. Just a dude being a dude right there.
He's a dude.
Dude being a dude.
Yeah.
I think that should be a segment next year.
Kyle's
on All
dudes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking dudes being dudes.
Oh, yeah, we can make that happen. But that's a dude. And a great call all the way through to just a buzzer beater at the win. We've seen some great buzzer beaters already here in conference play. You had the one earlier in the year with Adden Wright against UAB. You get RJ Felton here. You get a couple of different ones along the way. We've got a lot of hoops still to be talking about over these next few weeks. All right. We've got a game to go call.
We do.
Later today.
American Hoop Showcase.
North
You
Texas
have to listen
Temple.
to us again. Well, we hope that you tune in. It's going to be a really good matchup against two of the top teams in the American.
Should be a great crowd on hand. Winner basically takes over first place in the American for the remainder of the week. And you've got two teams that have some new head coaches, too. Coach Fisher, Coach Hodge, both in their second year. This is going to be a fun one. Join us tonight, ESPN Plus, the American Hoops Showcase. It'll be myself, Maria Trivelpiece on the sideline. We've got Heckma Harrison on the call with me as well. It's going to be something you won't want to miss. Great environment inside the Super Pit, North Texas Temple in Denton. But we appreciate you joining us here on a women's hoops edition of All-American. We've got plenty more of men's hoops to talk about next week as we now rotate back and forth week to week here on All-American and from Studio A. For Chris and Zach in the back who do a phenomenal job getting us on the air and making us look good. For Maria Trivelpiece, I'm Kyle Youmans. We'll see you next week with more All-American.